She had us, both of us, absolutely round her finger. Fundamentally, she achieved this through the way that she looked at us. It shouldn't have come as a surprise that the way she moved her head to one side should leave me basically on my knees, or more akin, I should say, to a slightly tepid pool of just water. But what was more surprising was the effect it had on him. Anything she wanted, he gave to her. Anything she demanded, he agreed to, and he agreed to everything with the same little smile on his face. The smile of a man who in actual fact was little more than 4 years old. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have agreed to the same or more in his position, it just seemed in some way, more downright surprising? Coming from him. He wasn't that kind of man, he was a soldier. When I say was, I mean he used to be. Between 1968 and 1984, he was a soldier in the British infantry. He reached the rank of lieutenant colonel and did 5 tours of Northern Ireland. And this was when, doing a tour of Northern Ireland was more than just a few games of pool and a chat with some kids outside a fish and chip shop. Some of the photographs that he took. He used to have a Polaroid camera, and some of the things that, after a few drinks, he'd get out of his box to show me. I mean, you wouldn't have thought they were Northern Ireland. There was something about them that I found in some way, surprising. He always refused to talk about the Falklands War, never mentioned it. I asked him about it one time, and his face turned, within a matter of a few seconds, literally grey. Slate grey. And even when he eventually retired from the army, he retrained as a maths teacher, for fuck's sake. Oh, I would have liked to have seen him teach. I can imagine the type of teacher he was. I don't think he would have worn too many corduroy pants. I don't think he would have shared too many coffees with his sixth formers.
Come and play with me. Read me a story. Can I sit in your lap? Where's Grandpops? Oh, there he is.
Not his kind of scene, But he did it with her. The first thing I learned about photography, I learned when I was a kid. If you're taking a portrait photograph, if you possibly can, then take it from below the subject. It renders the subject, actually, oddly, what it does is it renders them not more heroic, not more godlike. Oddly, it renders them more human. And if you can take it in natural light, if you can capture the way the light falls at the start, or at the end of the day especially, then it can be. He used to try to convince me that the existence of, the discovery of, and the understanding and the relevance and the possible uses of the irrational number, which is commonly, historically, and internationally known as pi, which is to 5 decimal places the number 3.14159, is irrevocable proof of the existence of God. It's just so illogical, he told us, that it can ever work, that it proves there's something more than us, and it's just so incredible that we can discover it. That proves something. I think he's wrong. I told him, I think you're wrong. I told him, for somebody so palpably intelligent, Arthur, sometimes you think like your head's full of wool. He liked me. He never got too cross. We'd talk about beer together. He never bothered me about coming from. He watched an unusual amount of tennis. I mean, everything was tennis with him. Conversation was kind of peppered with tennis metaphors. Sometimes I watched the tennis with him, but never really liked it much. Is it a terrible thing to say that sometimes the company of men can be somewhat comforting? I don't mean that to sound... I don't mean it anything other than... He had a house in the eastern suburbs of Toulon, in a town called Cacaren, in the south of fucking France, for fuck's sake. When I go there with Helen for the first time, we drive in her car. She's kind of a mix between being a bit embarrassed, because ostensibly at least, or at the time we're kind of what? Socialists? And just being really fucking proud because her dad has a house in the south of France and she's taking me there and she's paying for the ferry because I'm broke. And she keeps going on about how odd he is, but she has a feeling that she thinks that I'll like him. And I do. She says that's one of the things she likes about me. I like people. People like me. They think I'm gentle. I had absolutely no idea that people thought I was gentle. And she says that she really likes this bit. This bit is the best bit of a man, she says. Which is a phrase that just about sends me completely insane with love for her and for her nose and her smile and everything. Lucy was an emergency cesarean. We had her young, and there was a moment when Helen was giving birth that I thought she could have died. It's a bit embarrassing now, but I had to go to the bathroom to change into my... What are they called? Scrubs? Is it? I had to change into my scrubs, and I did have a bit of a cry. And when I did ask God, who I don't even fucking think is there in the first place, to make sure that Helen was all right. I said, we can survive if we lose the baby, but I don't know if I could make it if she went and died on me. It's like talking to a photograph or a mirror. It has the same effect, which isn't to discount it completely, but it's not God. The second time I go to his house, after we've been going out for 2 years, he takes me diving. He's become a big fan of scuba diving in the 18 months that Helen and I have been going out, which maybe is a surprising character development for someone of his age, but he's a surprising man. Between Saint-Tropez and the Ile de Pocros, there are, he says, actual shipwrecks that you can actually dive on. Would I like to come? Oh, I'd never worn a wetsuit before, and it takes me a bit longer to get into than I might have liked. Makes me feel a bit fat. He tells me he's going to take me to the seawall. The what? I say. He says the seawall. This makes absolutely no sense to me at all. There's a wall in the sea. Oh, it drops down hundreds of feet. I had absolutely no idea that the bed of the sea was built like that. I thought it was a gradual slope. He'd brought us these little bags with bits of bread in it, and you hold them upside down to swim with so you don't lose the bread because naturally the water floats upwards, and he takes us to the wall. And swimming there, even with the sun as bright as it is, and it is a bright day, even then, the darkness of the fall that the wall in the sea creates is as terrifying as anything I've seen. You get back to the surface, and of course the idea that there wasn't a seawall down there in the first place is a bit embarrassing, frankly. I mean, what did I think the bed of the sea was actually made of? When Helen's giving birth to Lucy, the midwife calls over to me and she says, "Daddy, do you want to see your baby born?" And they'd built a little tent, and, I'm one of those people that I don't know where to look when people point things out to me. Like, I'm a kid, and I'm driving along, and Mum says, "Look, a kestrel," or "Look, a plane." And I have no idea what to look at, so I kind of just smile and nod dumbly and say, "Oh, yeah." But I'm completely lying. Anyway, this is a bit like that. Mainly, I see the yellow of the inside of her stomach. I think once you've seen the inside of someone's stomach, your relationship with that person moves to what? A new level? I love her completely, with every bit of bone and skin in me. And there's been very few times in our relationship where she's cried and I've comforted her. I mean, I'm fucking crying all the time. I can't watch an episode of ER without being a complete wreck. I cry at ground force when the person comes back and they've had their garden done up as a surprise. So we go there to his house for our holidays every year. We did used to drive for 3 years straight. We drove all the way down from London without stopping. We took it in turns driving and kind of promised to share the navigating, but neither of us needed any help. We did it fine. But when Lucy was born, we started to fly, though, because the driving's not fair on the baby, and he'd buy us the tickets. You can get flights to Carcassonne for dead cheap, but he'd pay for us to fly into Nice, and he'd hire us a car when we got there. The first time he sees her, he takes her by surprise a bit. He looms over from behind her, and he's wearing these big, old glasses, and he's a very, very tall man, and he takes her by surprise, and she screams the living shit. Believe me. Took her about 3 weeks to recover from that, but she did. And then she starts with the crawling across the floor and putting her hands up to him and making these little noises that basically mean, put me on your lap and tell me a story now, you funny old fucker. I don't care if you're meant to be weird. I don't care if you're meant to be scary. I want a story and I want it now. Who could resist that? She starts wearing cardigans and that is me done for. One time, I say to him, if there is a God, is he a man? Oh, and the question kind of takes him by surprise a bit, but after a while he says that yes. In the end, he thinks that God is probably a man. So I say, what does he look like? Does he have a beard? Does he wear robes? Does he have long white hair? And he says, the thing about God is that whatever I think he looks like, well, he will look like the exact opposite to that. And whatever I think he is least likely to look like, well, that is what he will look like. So I ask him if he thinks that God looks a bit like Danny DeVito, and he says, do not be so bloody silly. So I tell him, if you don't want to tell me what he looks like, and you don't know what he looks like, and he doesn't look like anything, then how do you know he is anything more than just an idea? Just something you made up? She's 8. We've been going every year. We did talk for a few years about having a second child, but every time we do, we just think about Lucy, and we think, you know what? We just want her. She's the best. She's clever. She's funny. She's very, very determined. She's Helen's sidekick. She's my sweetheart. They make wisecracks about me. The two of them stand there sizing me up. But I know that if she pushes it too far, she'll come running over to me and put her arms around me because the idea of making me sad makes her feel a little bit sick. In the 8 years that she's been born, I've fucked a lot of things up. But somehow, by the skin of my teeth, managed to largely come out unscathed. And me and Helen, we're doing okay. We have these little routines and stuff, like about the dishwasher or the shopping or the cooking, because I really like to cook for her, but compared to her, I'm a bit shit at it. So when she cooks, it's properly a treat. And we have these routines, but it's like we fucking love them instead of finding them, what? Restricting? Sometimes when you swim in the sea, the force of the waves can crash against you, can knock you over. There have been times in the past when just getting out of the sea that I've been knocked over. 2 summers ago this happened and I cracked my coccyx on a stone on the shore's edge and kind of flailed about like some kind of huge seal. I was, in that moment, the mathematical polar opposite of Daniel Craig. It doesn't normally get like this where he is. Normally the sea's warm there, which is quite an unusual feeling for me. I always swim out as far as I think is safe, then turn, swim another 10 strokes, then stop and swim back. Sometimes you think the tide's caught you. You panic because you think you're not moving. You are. You just need to turn on your back, collect your breathing, kick slowly. You're moving. I ask him, where is he? He says, who? I say, God. Is he in the sky? I mean, that's where people used to think he was, children and medieval people. Is he on the edge of our galaxy? Is he on the edge of our solar system? Because every time we think we've located where he is, we find out something else and we realize that God can't be there. Is he 15 billion light years away on the very edge of the universe, on the parts of the universe that make up the form of the time of the Big Bang, that have that kind of density? Is he there? Is that where he is? And he says, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't know everything, Alex. There are some things we don't know. There are things we can't explain. And I say, now. He says, what? I say, we can't explain them now, but that doesn't mean they have no reason. It just illustrates the gaps in our knowledge. It doesn't mean that we won't be able to explain them one day, because because I think we will. I want to acknowledge something. It's embarrassing because you probably would have all noticed. There's a hole running through the center of my stomach. You must have all felt a bit awkward because you can probably see it, even in this light. Mostly people choose to not talk about it. Sometimes they say they're sorry, but yes, they can see my hole. What's that? They say. There appears to be a great big hole running right through the middle of you. I'd started doing okay. You know, I know it sounds stupid, but I got a contract for British home stores, taking photographs for their catalogues and their websites, the men's wear, the women's wear, the back to school stuff, the homeware. I made so much money from taking photographs of cushions and saucepans and digital alarm clocks, I can barely believe it myself. So 5 weeks ago, just before we go, just for all the packing and the frantic stuff about what we're going to take, Helen's bought some stuff to take with us. She's got Lucy all her new stuff, her dresses and her cozy and her toys and books for the flight. Oh, and she got me these shades, which are properly pucker, seriously, very Reservoir Dogs. And she asked me to come into the bedroom because there's something she wants to show me. And I get there, and she's wearing this dress. It's a blue dress with a dropped back. And she asked me to tell her what I think. I swear for about 30 seconds I couldn't speak. She looked. And the idea that I was married to her, and that we had our girl, and that this was our life. There's a man in the market in Port Grimmo that we visit on our second day there, and he sells us a case of claret for the equivalent of 15 quid, and it is like heaven. We drink 2 bottles on our second night there. The next day, Helen has to go to the supermarket to buy some bread and some shampoo for Lucy, and I need some athlete's foot cream. Oh, and we love, they have these little yogurts, these little pots of vanilla-flavoured yogurt that you can't get in Britain. And she wants to get some cheese. It is fun to get it from the market, but as it goes, it's a proper rip-off, so she decides to go to the supermarket, which is actually where most of the French people go anyway. So me and Arthur go down with Lucy, down to the sea. There's this bay just near his house, and around the corner from the bay, there's this little cove. And when the bay's busy, you can go to this cove, which is actually nearer to his house. It's more secluded, it's quiet, lovely. We talk about it, decide to go there. She can go into this world. Did you ever know any kids like that? When she thinks nobody's looking, she can start off going further and further into her imagination, playing games all by herself. Actually, what she's really doing is she's talking to herself, which some people might find disconcerting, but I just love to watch her. One time, he says to me, he looks at me, and he says to me, he's in the feeling of water. Sometimes there's the shape of the roll of the land. He's in the way that some people move. He's in the light falling over the city at the start of an evening. He's in the space between 2 numbers. You know what the cruelest thing I ever did to anybody was? I'll tell you. I'd started getting into detective fiction. I have a friend who works at St Mary's University, and he says, Alex, all fiction is detective fiction. He's completely wrong. Jane Austen is not detective fiction. Franz Kafka is not detective fiction. Bridget Jones is not detective fiction. Detective fiction is detective fiction. James Elroy. Arthur goes for a swim. I'm reading L.A. Noire, the bit where the cop and the killer are in the deserted car park at midnight with the lights out, neither knowing the other one's there. Lucy's kind of being a Power Ranger. Oh, the sun is gorgeous. Got my shades on, it's so bright. He comes back. The water's amazing, he says. He dries off, and I notice his feet. The skin on his feet is unusually battered and cracked. It's one of the moments you kind of rumble that he's getting a little old. And then he tells me I can go for a swim. I do. And the water is amazing. I wade out past the first bank. I swim all the way out past the seaweed and swim out and out and out around the bay and the light. At that time of day, the light on the Mediterranean is, and the sea is warm. I turn around. I'm about 20 yards out. The sky is this huge blue curve. I can see the houses at the top of the road. I can see his house. I can see Arthur sitting reading. He's reading some history of China. He's really into it. Towel draped around his lap. Water dripping onto his book. I can see all of this from here with real detail. I can see Lucy playing behind him, running about a bit, playing Power Rangers. I can watch them as she does a little bit of a jump. It's odd because he's so into his book that he doesn't notice that she loses her footing on the sand and the gravel of the rock, and she slips and stumbles. And she's quite close to a little edge of one of the rocks there, and what she does is she tries to correct her balance. And in trying to correct her balance, she actually puts more weight on her back foot, which slips from underneath her. And it's weird to look at because she does fall off the edge of this 6-foot-high cliff, and she falls backwards and she cracks her head on some rocks jutting out at the bottom of the cliff. I can see it all clearly, but I can't really hear anything. And it's weird to look at with no sound. Like, if the sound's off on the telly, it's always a bit strange. Takes me a moment to register before I turn and swim back to shore. I'm swimming faster and faster, which is stupid because I'm panicking, and when you panic, you can't breathe. So I have to tell myself, collect your breathing. I can kind of watch him between strokes, and he's thrown down his book and jumped off the cliff towards where she is. And there's this other couple that I hadn't noticed before that had stopped their sunbathing and run towards where she is. And I notice him pick her up. He's torn between going back to the house to call an ambulance and waiting for me to get there. But I get there in enough time for him not to have to worry about this for too long. I go to her. I take her from him. What there is, which is surprising to me, there is a clump of blood in her hair. It's thick and matted, and her hair is all chewed up by it. I read that it's a process that is never absolutely instantaneous, that the injury causes death to the brain cells, so signals are no longer sent to the lungs, and bit by bit the machine closes down. Her blood sticks to my hands. I carry her up the path of the cove, and I haven't bothered getting dried, and people are looking at me, stopping still in their tracks and talking to me in French, and I'm kind of aware that I'm not crying. I look like fuck, I don't know, and as I carry her through the glass sliding doors, I hit her head against the wall. And I'm talking to her, which is stupid, and I tell her I'm sorry for hitting your head. But there's a part of me that's thinking, well, fuck it now. What does it fucking matter now? I may as well drag her by her fucking ankle, this bit of meat and air. I remember being a bit astonished because one of the ambulance men spoke English, quite good English, and he said that he lived in Southampton, and I couldn't help but thinking, why the fuck did you live in Southampton of all places? The sound of her coming through the door with bags full of yogurt and shampoo and cheese and bread takes me completely by surprise. She looks at me across his house. She's wearing glasses to protect her against the light. Oh, Jesus fuck. He's sitting on the sofa. He's still wrapped in his towel. He is a man that is completely broken. He is a shattered form. The little noises that he makes. I leant over the desk at the check-in at Nice, and we'd actually been pushed to the front of the queue. We'd been given an upgrade, and as the lady there was sorting all this out, I leant over her and looked at the sheet she was checking off on the desk, and it had a list of the passengers and the crew and baggage. And at the end of the list, it read, human remains, which was a bit. We're sitting there, the three of us in the departure lounge of the airport. Can't really look at one another. We can't touch one another or anybody else. I turned to him, and this is the cruelest thing I ever did to anybody. And don't forget, this is the man that I've known him 10 years, and I do. I love him. I turn to him and I say to him, you get back to London and, of course, the sound of the place and the noise and the dirt and the colour of it, what I can't do for now, at least, is work. You know, there's a lie at the heart of photography that I've always cherished. When taking a photograph, what you actually do is you capture something that's actually alive. To do this, you need, more than anything, to believe in life. There's a child outside the window laughing, and in his laugh there is absolutely no joy or humour. Warning, vehicle is reversing. I have a complete and total inability to cry. You know, when people say to you they can't imagine not believing anything because it would just be too depressing, I think there's something sick about that. The level of cowardice in that is just unbearable to me. I've been home 3 weeks. This can happen, anything can happen. Just now there was a couple on the street and they were arguing, and it was as if they were trying to deliberately copy characters out of soap operas in the way that they argued. As if the most famous they'll ever get is rowing on the street like they were actually on EastEnders. I mean, the misery and the emptiness and the vacuous fucking shitness of their lives was so considerable to that of soap characters that it acted as some kind of consolation. Helen moves around the house. I'm holding my entire head together. The skin and the shell of me. I'm falling completely inside myself. But you can see that. You can see that in my... Just because we don't know doesn't mean we won't know. We just don't know yet. But I think one day we will. I think we will.